What if I forgave myself, I thought. What if I forgave myself even though I'd done something I shouldn't have done? What if I was a liar and a cheat, and there was no excuse for what I'd done other than because it was what I wanted and what I needed to do? What if I was sorry, but if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have done anything differently than what I had done? Welcome to this Destiny Movie Night Hangout. What I just read here was a quote by Cheryl Strayed from the movie Wild that we're going to be talking about today. She wrote a book about her experiences walking the Pacific Coast Trail in the early 90s, and this quote comes from the book and is also part of the movie. So hello everyone and welcome. We're going to discuss this movie Wild today, and with us we have two guests who are going to share their insights and perspectives from watching this movie. So we have Kim with us from South Africa, originally from Belgium. Hey Kim.
Hi everyone.
And then we have Yogan with us from Miami, Florida in the US. Hi Yogan.
Hello.
Hello. And my name is Anna, and I am based here in Sweden, in Europe. As always, we invite you to participate and make this discussion interactive. So if you have watched Wild, you're more than welcome to share your perspectives in the comment section of our Google Plus event. You have to be logged in with your Google Plus account to participate. And if you want to ask any questions about the topic of tonight's Hangout, even if you haven't watched the movie Wild, you're definitely most welcome to do that as well. So, you know, I just gave this quote from Cheryl Strayed that shows that it's a very, you could say, emotionally potent topic of this movie. And to give like a brief synopsis, the movie is basically about this woman who in the early 90s decided to go for this 3-month-long hike on the Pacific Coast Trail in the USA. And she did this because she was, and I'm doing a spoiler here, so you have to close your ears if you haven't watched the movie and you don't want to hear the spoiler. But basically she decided to go on this journey because she was in such a state of grief over losing her mother that she more or less lost her sanity and lost her way in her life, you could say. She ended up doing drugs, she cheated on her husband, she basically got further and further out in her life, and in the end she decided to do something completely wild to try and find herself again. So the movie follows her as she goes on this hike, and she's someone who's never hiked before, she has no idea what she's doing, and you then you follow her in her inner journey, you could say, in walking through her grief and her regret and her guilt and her shame and how she eventually finds herself. So that is the basic, the gist of the story of the movie. But I'd like to start out by asking you guys, because we've talked a little bit here before the Hangout started, and we've discovered that we've all three have different gifts being given to us or that we could get from this movie. So I'd like to start off by asking you, Jürgen, what was it that you liked about this movie? How did it hit home for you?
I mean, there are very many different points. The one that I would like to share the most, though, would be how she was on her journey, right? Walking this trail, like, I don't know how many miles, like thousands.
Thousands,
miles of trail. And she met all these different characters on the trail, and it was very interesting seeing her interactions with them. And then with some of them specifically, she had, you know, received something from them, some sort of support from them. And I thought that was very interesting that even though she was on this journey of self-reflection and introspection, trying to find out about who she is, what she's going to do, it also still involved a lot of interactions and support from other people. And that is still, you know, like here in Destiny, we have that saying, like, you know, we're in this alone, yet we're in this together as well. So it's that principle I saw within how the movie is playing out.
How about you, Kim? What was the main point or insight that you got from this movie?
Well, I would say in relation to a point that myself in when watching this movie is the woman's internal struggle and internal battle, where she experiences such a chaos inside of herself that she just doesn't find any other way to deal with it than to just walk away from her life and the system and do something very extreme that could even possibly get her killed, because she's so desperate to leave everything of herself behind. And I mean, that to me is also what brought me to Destiny, for instance, is my desperation that I experienced in relation to really wanting to change myself and just do anything to be able to leave the past behind.
Yeah, it's interesting how we have these like very different takes on it, which is also very cool because, like I explained to Kim and Jochen before we started the hangout, to me it was a very personal, quite an intimate experience to watch this movie, because I don't usually get very moved or identify a lot with the movie, but I definitely identified with this movie and with Cheryl's story. And I remember particularly, do you guys remember in the beginning of the movie where she stands on that dirt road and she's about to go in on the trail, and she's like, you know, she almost want to turn back, and she's like, what the hell am I doing? And then she just, you know, okay, I'm just gonna go for it. And that's something that I can relate to a lot in my own process. But one of the reasons why I really wanted to come and talk about this movie as well is because of the topic of regret and shame, and how she almost could not bear her past and what she had done, and how she had, you know, like how you kind of get yourself into these more and more self-destructive situations that also has consequences for other people in your life, and how you're actually able to walk yourself out of it. And so for me, that was an empowering message in terms of how you are able to forgive yourself, which also the quote that I said in the beginning shows, and you are able to walk yourself out of it. Though what we've also talked about, and what we'll talk a little bit more about here, is that you don't necessarily have to go on a 3-month survival hike in the mountains to get to this understanding. So I would say that this journey that Cheryl goes through, which is basically a journey of self-forgiveness and a journey of letting go of the past and walking through grief, it's quite synonymous with the process that we're walking with Destiny, and the process that we're each walking for ourselves in terms of walking through our past and letting it go, and being able to step into what is here with, you know, new eyes, fresh eyes. How would you say, how have you seen the journey that she takes as being synonymous with what we're walking, and what can we take from that in terms of gifts in our own processes? Jochen, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So what we do here is very, I guess, structured. So we have like a structure which we walk, and then it's very clear, like we actually use the word phrase, I forgive myself, and that's a very defined structure that we use, that, you know, through walking this process, like it's, you know, we know what we're doing, we're very aware that we are in a process of forgiveness, we're in a process of letting go of the past and taking responsibility. And so we're, you know, this is very much something done with intent and with awareness of, you know, I've done this, I've seen my mistakes, I see it's not best for everyone, and so I'm changing upon that realization. And so, you know, with how this movie goes, I've been around, so I've seen plenty of like spiritual journeys and journeys into yourself, and that's sort of like, you know, what we're doing, but it's definitely like a very clear, defined structure that we have. And so for her, of course, she didn't have that structure available to her. So, you know, she had to sort of go with what she had. And so, you know, for some reason, this trek made sense for her. So she went on that, and it offered for her the opportunity to, you know, face hardship, to keep pushing, to try to challenge herself and find things about herself that she probably didn't know could be possible. So I mean, it's very interesting. At least I mean, for those who haven't seen the movie, how she goes into her memories a lot, and
Yeah.
that's all we know what we do too with our processes. And throughout her journey, she's going through her memories and her reactions, her different
Yeah.
kinds of reactions of involving either aggression or maybe even guilt. I don't know, or whatever she felt, and just she going through all those motions, as they say, and then it's very interesting seeing that in a movie in a form like that, involving a journey, and of course at the end she has a very significant realization for herself, and it's very interesting. Also, I don't know if we mentioned this yet, that this is based on a memoir, so there's
Yes,
movies based
it's
on the person's
yeah.
life experience, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah. You know what was interesting when what you said about the structure, that we're walking this within a structure, and then I saw that she's also walking with a structure. She has a specific route and a specific trail, and it has, a specific amount of miles, and she has a map. And I would say, which is something that I'm only seeing now, is that she did walk out on that journey with the purpose of getting herself back. It wasn't completely random. Let me just walk out into the wilderness because I don't know what to do. She did have, maybe she was not completely fully aware of that intent, but it was with that purpose, of walking out there. And you could say that she maybe also had some form of resource within herself to be able to see that and do that for herself. But Kim, have you experienced wanting to do something like this in your life? And if you did it, was it effective? Like, is that would you say that it's an effective way to deal with mourning and sorrow and regret?
Well, the way that I've experienced something similar to what she did was place myself in extreme situations. For instance, deliberately throwing away all of my money and placing myself on the streets, like placing myself as a homeless person, basically, which I did to push myself to like give up everything. But actually, what it did for me was just generate more fears. From the perspective that I tried to face my fears, but when I got back into the system, I actually had to face those fears all over again because they were still inside of myself, even though I actually placed myself into those physical situations. So, another thing I did was, for instance, Vipassana, which is a form of meditation where you go to this facility for 10 days with all these people, and you're not supposed to talk, and you just kind of walk around. You wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and you go to bed at 9, and you just kind of meditate, and then walk around and meditate again, eat, meditate, walk around, which is also like an extreme thing. And for me, I mean, all I did was suppress whatever it was that I was trying to get away from inside of myself. And I mean, also with her, she goes into nature and does this whole walk, which I can understand that calms your mind, like the just being in nature and being in a place where there's no people. I mean, there's no trigger points for you to react to. So she's stuck with herself, so she kind of has to calm down and she has to find that peace of mind. But I mean, eventually she is going to go back into the system, and there is going to be, again, certain trigger points and things happening to her. And I mean, she hasn't actually really dealt with her emotions in terms of understanding how they work or how it functions, how the mind functions, how she can really stop emotions when they are triggered in real life situations, which is usually in the system when you're interacting with people. So, I guess she still needs to see how it's going to be for her when she steps back into the system, which is the part of the movie we're not seeing, obviously. But
Yeah, though it did go quite well for her after that, but because I mean Cheryl Strayed is a real person, so you can go and Google her. But Kim, so I was looking at with this point that you were mentioning. So if she had been a part of destiny. What would you say? Like, also, I'm looking at here the point of if there's someone out there who is having similar experiences where, for example, you've been through an intense period of grief that you haven't been able to handle within yourself. And then because of that, you've started becoming self-destructive and started doing things that are actually layering on consequences on top of the grief that you now also have to deal with because you're doing things that you're going to regret later in life and you're creating consequences in other people's lives. So how, if you were to handle that as a Destonian, what could she have done differently? So to also say that it's not necessary to go to the extreme of going on such a hike, although we're obviously not saying that you shouldn't or it's a bad thing to do, but more that it shouldn't be necessary because there are other things that you could do in these situations. So what could she have done instead?
Well, I think I suppose that it just depends on your starting point. Like, she went on the hike and she found herself, or she found peace of mind, and she got back into the system, and then she was able to build a life for herself. But I mean, it's different from when you're walking with destiny and you're walking your process. You're doing it from a starting point of not just finding peace of mind, but understanding yourself and understanding the system and taking responsibility not just for your own life, but for the world and for all that exists. So it's easy to take on a certain personality wherein you can find that peace of mind. But that personality would then be based on a form of, like, kind of a religious construct wherein you've kind of paid penance for your sins by, for instance, doing this whole trail, which was like a trial for her to show that she is paying for her sins in a way by walking this whole journey. And through walking that journey, she found peace of mind because in the eyes of God, she was now forgiven. Because in a way she suffered for her sins, which is like a religious construct. And, but with destiny, we take it one step further and we actually investigate those kind of constructs that we tend to go into when we're looking for peace of mind. To, not just exist in those kind of pre-programmed constructs anymore.
So, Jürgen, what would you say, what practical steps could she have taken, for example, in her grief or when she had already gotten to the point of being self-destructive, so that she wouldn't have to go on this very long journey into the wilderness?
Yeah, because in her context, that's what she thought she had to do, and that's what she did. Now we're, working with this, with Destiny and the principles and the tools and the courses. We have something available. So let's say if she had that available to her, then she could, in writing, investigate who she is and introspect and question and write down her memories, write down her experiences, really understand why she's acting the way she is, and what memories are involved within that, what reactions are, what is she reacting to as a physical action or as a thought, or so understanding basically herself and doing that whole process is you can perhaps see what she was maybe really trying to look for in the movie, is some sort of understanding of herself, and maybe like everyone wants to become a better person. I don't know if I haven't met everyone, but I feel like if you'd ask yourself that question, there are things that we want to better ourselves with. So for her, through the process that we have with Destiny, that could have been more structural, more clear. She could have known in detail what was going on within her, and not just more of a find some space within her where she can feel good and be able to manage her life and manage her career and manage her life situation, which is kind of what psychology does nowadays, is more of a managing kind of thing. instead of
Yeah.
finding
Sorry.
yeah,
Go
finding
ahead.
a root, instead of finding a root, like permanent root solution to actually understand the root. It's what we have now is more like management systems that only suppresses or deals with it on a very surface layer. I mean, that's like society. That's what I'm saying in general. That's what most people have, is just a managing kind of way of life.
Yeah, so because what she's dealing with as the original experience is grief over her mother's death. And so what is being told, the story that is being told through the movie, or like the catharsis, in addition to what you were saying, Kim, about the religious construct, is that you basically have to allow yourself to feel it all. And she's going through, in the movie, she's going through all these memories of her mother, and how much she loved her and how deep their relationship was, and how she says in the movie that her mother is the love of her life. And so what I would say that walking this destiny process, which means that you're walking through the same things that she's walking through, but we're doing it in direct awareness. So that means that we seek to understand, like, what is grief? Why am I being, if we were in that situation, we could look at, why am I being overwhelmed with this experience of grief to such an extent that I feel like I want to destroy my life? What is the attachment that I have created to my mother inside my mind? Because she's dead. It is what it is, and of course, I have to grieve and be sad that she's not here. But the fact that I'm starting to wanting to destroy my own life is indicating that there's something more going on than me simply grieving the loss of my mother. And so you can actually stop that whole cycle of consequences that starts spinning out of control, even at that point in time. But even also when it goes even further, which I've certainly experienced for myself, being self-destructive, as well as doing things that I regretted to the point of thinking that I can never go back, I can never regain what was lost, like being tainted in a way. And it's a similar experience that I see in her, where she does heroin and she cheats on her husband and she has a lot of like promiscuous sex with strangers.
Yeah.
That okay, so you are at that point, but even there, that's what I also really liked about the movie, is that there's this whole physical journey that she goes through, but I can actually go through a similar journey with direct awareness right here in my living room with my computer, while I still have my partner and my job. And it's possible to do that, to actually walk that process of that journey alone with yourself, right where you are. Like you were saying, Kim, you don't have to escape everything, only to return and have it all in your face again. It is actually possible with the tools that we have found to do it with yourself right where you are. So is that something that you guys could relate to?
Yeah, there's something that I think would be cool to point out, is that within the Destiny rules and principles, how we approach people in our lives, and let's say each person is a gift and there's something that they can offer us. Like, we put that within, what Cheryl could have used or could have done as with the loss of her mother. I mean, the reason why she was reacting so much, yes, she had like an attachment, but at the same time, there's probably something about her mother that she saw that she really resonated with her, and that she, it would, if she wasn't really living herself, and if she had sort of realized that, like, oh, this is something that my mother's representing for me, that I would like to live for myself and express that, it would have been like a whole different story. And that's something that we sort of found too within investigations, is how that possibility of instead of like when someone dies, someone leaves, there's that point of grief, but at the same time to find like the key, find that thing that that they really represented for you, really is offering you as a gift, to then live that for yourself and actually have that. And so then you actually in a way grow and expand, and in a way I would like to say, like, in a way keep people alive, because then you're still actually living that. that wonderful aspect that you like about them so much, and then you eventually could potentially spread that to other people, and then they could live it too, through you being an example of living it. So that's something that something that I think most people don't really recognize so much within relationships, but that something that we sort of recognize here in the process, and yeah, what we're working with.
Yeah, and then the way that it's being presented in the movie as a given is that grief is something that you naturally go through. There's not necessarily a directive process. It's just like some kind of process you have to go through, and then at some point it's going to be over and you're going to be out of it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah. So we have a comment here from Kathy, and she's actually bringing up a really cool quote that I also wanted to share by Cheryl. And she says that one thing to note here is that Cheryl did realize how fear, and that is in Cheryl's own words, fear to a great extent is born of a story that we tell ourselves. So that is one of the realizations that you had on her journey, because she basically walks into this extremely, you could say, daunting situation. She's never hiked before, and she embarks us on this very, in some respects, dangerous journey, and is empowered in realizing that she was stronger than she thought. So what did you guys see in this point when she said that about fear? What would you say, Kim?
Well, that is a really cool realization, in that fear is based on thoughts we have in our mind. And in terms of the rest of that quote, where she says that you have to then just tell yourself another story in order to break free from that fear, or something like that, which is in a way also in line with what we do with the Desteni tools in terms of like self-commitment statements. However, the danger there can exist that when you tell yourself a new story in order to correct the fear, or in order to make yourself feel stronger and not allow yourself to be influenced by fear, is to then actually not really understand where the fear is coming from in the first place. And then when you're in different kinds of situations, the fear will just come up again because you don't really understand it. So this is where, with applying the Desteni tools with self-forgiveness and self-introspection, we make sure that we actually understand the fear, and that the new story we tell ourselves would be simply, our correction based on how we realize reality actually functions. Because, fear is based on a story, and a story is never in alignment with reality. So we only respond with fear to things when we don't see reality for what it is. So once we see reality for what it actually is, our new story actually just becomes reality. It just becomes us showing reality to ourselves. So, yeah.
Did you want to add something to that, Jürgen?
No, it's just really cool. There was something else. So, that within the specific, the comment, the Kathy, the quote, I was reminded how in the movie you hear her back chat, like her thoughts, what she's thinking, and she's cursing, and like saying like all this stuff, like all these negative things, and I don't know, just that one aspect that's just cool to see, I guess, in a movie, that actually show people thinking, especially like that kind of like train of thought, which is just just random thoughts, like it's not really supportive of what you're doing, and especially if you make a decision and like what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of like you can see the fear come up in there, I guess.
Yeah, Jürgen, also you shared before the hangout this point with what you saw in, at some point in the movie she starts throwing her boots.
Yeah.
Do you want to share what you saw with that as well?
Yeah, that also what Kim was saying there, and looking at that, how within the story that she's telling herself, continuing with that, how that story turns into an aggression story, like a conquering story, where within her, let's say, she sees her feet getting all destroyed, then she reacts and she just throws her boots away, and then just screaming. And then, as she's walking now through the trail, she's all aggressive and all emotional, all hyped up. And then, she's just like pushing through. But, when you're in that kind of state, then that's when you sort of are very distracted. You're not very aware of your body. You're not very aware of the situation. And so you risk injuring yourself or pushing yourself too hard or those kind of situations. And, it's like, in the movie, if, looking at her memories popping up with those scenes, like let's say her most suppressed memories were coming up at that point. So as if she was also reacting to that too. So she's really entering into like a full possession there, like with her memories and just the whole situation. And then she just, yeah. Then I noticed that too within her, how she was walking, how she was talking with people too. She was sort of in that aggressive state. And there's a huge difference between at the end of the movie where she sort of then shifts out of that. But of course, you really see there's no full understanding of her aggression, of her, and why it's happening, of her connection. And so that's like, that's sort of missing, like the missing piece of the puzzle. Which is what we work with here at Desteni. That's why we're able to talk about it, because we see that what's needed is to be able to understand it and write it out, and not allow yourself to get possessed, but have stability and walk with care with your body and with awareness and support, and not to participate within that, because that also could lead to other consequences as well. And so, it's a whole can of worms right there.
So, Kim, in the movie, there are a lot of stunning pictures, and there's a lot, you could say, Cheryl's exploration or experiences with being in nature. So in what ways would you say that we can utilize nature as well as physical movement, which is also part of the journey that she walks? How can we utilize that in our processes?
Well, first of all, what I would like to mention in relation to like the urge that people can sometimes experience to just go into nature and to, for instance, go on these extreme hikes to like get out of their mind, is that, that's actually an interesting point, is that we do kind of, it's like in the back of our mind or somewhere inside of ourselves, we have that awareness that the solution to who we are and to everything we experience inside of ourselves is within the physical, and we have that drive or that tendency to to do physical things to get out of our mind. So from that perspective, it's like we kind of just have to discover the nature that is already here inside of and as our own physical bodies. I mean, it's like, when you talk about nature, images pop up of, going trail hiking or seeing these vast mountains with trees and squirrels and animals and stuff. But I mean, within that, it's like we miss the very simple nature that is already here inside of our own bodies. And that's also the reason why we can very easily get lost in our mind when we're in the system, because we don't see that, this is nature right here. And this is home. I don't have to go into some kind of mountain or go to animals or something that represents nature as a picture, because the nature as a physical substance is already right here. So, that would be my take on that point.
Well, I would say, or to add to that, that I found that it's not always possible to, go straight to the point of seeing your own nature here, especially if the emotions are so intense and the thoughts are so intense that it's completely taken over your entire being and body. And like, maybe, for her, maybe she's even lived in it for several years already. So I do find that taking a walk, for example, but now I'm talking about the simplicity of just taking a walk in my neighborhood and not, for nature to kind of give me something or do something for me, but more the point of simply moving myself and moving my body. And then, like in moments, like some of the moments in my life where I've really been like felt like I'm losing my mind, for example, or I don't know what to do to get myself out of this. Taking a walk and being physical has really like saved me, so to speak. Like that has really just that, and also walking for quite some time, to actually ground the body, and there's like a stability in when you walk, that the rhythm of it. But it could also be doing physical labor, like doing the dishes. Something very simple can be extremely supportive. And I'm reminded by, there's this guy, I don't remember what he's called, but he has a celebrity cat. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Burma the Adventure Cat. And so basically it is a veteran who was I think he was in Afghanistan or Iraq, a couple of tours, also from the US. And he came back with the post-traumatic stress syndrome to such an extent that he couldn't function in society with the way that his mind was. And so he became homeless and started just driving into the wilderness. And then he got this cat with him that is then, going on adventure with him. And he said that, nature, or in that respect, going into the wild, it saved his life because it was the only place that he didn't have to, you could say, because basically when you've been to war and you have all those traumatic experiences, which is similar to Cheryl, and you're then confronted with normal life, it can be very difficult. So I could imagine that it can be like a bridge. It can be similar to, where you do something for a moment to support yourself, but then eventually you get to the point where you have to face the memories, or you have to walk through it as well. Like you were saying, Kim, that you have to go back to civilization at some point. But I do see that it can be supportive to utilize nature, especially in those moments of where you cannot do anything else and you cannot talk to anyone. Then it can be like a last resort that can be effective. Let's look at here if we have any questions. Anything you wanted to add, Jürgen?
Yeah, for that point, well, when it is for me, when I'm in a possession, like full blown, like, just so much, so much in reaction that, there's no point in trying to work through the point. I just have to find a way to, like, lower the energy, and, like, even just basically, it's whenever I have, like, an energetic reaction, it's not worth allowing that to, like, even exist, for any moments. It's always good to just let go of the energy, and, when you're working with points, it's best to let go of that energy. I'm saying energy is like with emotions and feelings, is what I'm referring to when you feel that kind of, like, to explain to people, like, it's kind of like, you just sort of, like, become, I guess, through working with the course, you sort of understand what it is through your experience and writing and, like, seeing what it is. But basically, like, in that kind of situation, you just have to, like, let go of it first before you start writing it out, because if you start writing, then trying to understand is going to be kind of, like, biased too. So it's, like, always, like, the first thing you do is let go of the energy and just stabilize yourself, and then, the best you can, and, it's always a good step to do. And that's exactly sort of what Cheryl did too. I mean, you just have to stabilize yourself with what you can, and that's a very important first step, and then you go on to going deeper.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It doesn't really matter, as long, do whatever works. Whatever works, do it. Yeah. Guys, we're reaching the end of the hangout here. Is there any other insights that you would like to share, Kim, that you've got from watching the movie?
Hold on. Nothing's coming up at the moment. Maybe Yogan would like to go first on this one?
Any last words?
Yes.
My last words. Okay. I don't know. Right now, like, I can pick some points. Like the fox, I think was pretty interesting. Is like the symbolism of the animal, and how the animal is like that part of us, which is, like, in a way more wise, more stable, more aware, and how sort of connected to that point. They're sort of showing that in the movie, and I think that's just important because that's kind of like support that animals provide us that isn't always utilized or we're not always aware of. So I think it's cool that they emphasize that, because animals can give you a gift, and their presence and being with them. But I thought that was pretty cool that they have in the movie.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And of course, if you haven't watched it, we can recommend doing that and see what you may get out of it or learn from it. All right, thank you, Jürgen and Kim. Thank you so much for being here. And we will be back next week with a movie from, I believe it's from the 1980s called They Live. And it is with our regular movie hangout host, Joanna. And of course, on Thursday, we have our weekly Desteni process hangout as well, where Christina will be talking us through another point in the work environment series. Please remember to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.